Estamos de vuelta con un tema súper interesante. Recién vimos todos temas relacionados con infraestructura y ahora vamos a
We just saw all the aspects related to infrastructure. And right now, we have everything that is on top of infrastructure. They use 5G, Industry 4.0, Internet of Things. And for this panel that is going to last for an hour, I'm going to introduce a moderator, a friend of the school, Ingeniero Molano, Diego Molano. Diego is a very important person for the school. When he was Minister of IT and Telecommunications in Colombia, he wanted to take the school to Colombia. We organized it in Bogota. That was the third school in 2012. And for us, was a quantum leap that we always wanted to maintain. He said that there should be remote participation and presence in social media. It was 2012. So imagine that it was very, very good. He had a team, and we were trending topic in Twitter for the whole week in Colombia. To tell the truth for us, it raised the quality bar in terms of scope, number of attendees, and we never wanted to reduce it. It was forever in our standards of quality. So for the history of our school, it's very important. He's also very important in the world of telecommunication. Let's welcome you once back again at the school. You're going to be the moderator of a very, very interesting topic. You're in a very nice place. Where are you? Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for your presentation and introduction. This pandemic is accelerating this digital transformation. And you can see the impact with these platforms in the South School of Internet Governance. I said that we have a fabulous panel with incredible panelists. And my first comment is that the biggest problem of transformation, the challenge of digital transformation in Latin America has to do with talent. That is a challenge, and by far the most important one. And we have to create 4 types of talent. Programmers. Second, that all professionals should have the skills and know-how of technology. The third pillar is to have leaders in this digital transformation. We have 4 worldwide renowned leaders in digital transformation. And the fourth and most important pillar is to have women. And it's not a minor thing, and it's not a gender-based equality issue. It's that they have the necessary skill to make the necessary digital transformation that men we do not have. So here we have a panel of many men, but as you can see, also we have many women attending. For those who want that are watching this on YouTube or in streaming, we are well represented. Thank you very, very much for your introduction. I am not going to introduce everybody because the CVs are in the web, and you can all see that posted in the web. In order to start, you have to tell them, you have to tell the audience a secret that has nothing to do with your job. And I would like to start with mine.
estaba pensando que con cuál empezar. Bueno, yo soy Diego Molano y vivo en Washington, pero ahora estoy en
I live in
Santa Marta pasando la
Washington,
pandemia y estoy ahora empezando
but
a Washington.
I'm spending some time between Santa Marta and
El secreto
Washington.
que no es laboral es que sufro de un problema que tiene Facundo.
The secret is that I'm suffering
Y es que
from a
soy una
problem that
víctima de
Facundo
las
is
mujeres de
suffering.
Santa Marta.
And I'm a
Me
victim
casé con
of
una
the
samaria y
women
por
in
eso se reprodujo
Santa
y tengo dos
Marta.
niñas samarias.
That's why I have
Entonces,
two
me tienen
Colombian
totalmente
daughters.
dominado.
So I am
Entonces,
fully dominated by
secreto, y mire, Facundo se ríe porque sabe
these
perfectamente
women.
que eso es una
And
realidad.
Facundo knows full well that this is a reality. We're all
Pero
we're all
voy a arrancar
victims.
con Rebellon. Rebe,
I'm going to start
tienen
with
estas
Carlos
nuevas tecnologías,
Rebellon.
tienen ya el despliegue
Because these technologies are coming, we
de
have the
IoT.
deployment of 5G.
América Latina, pues digamos que tiene
Latin
ha venido
America
progresando en el despliegue de infraestructura de
made progress
telecomunicaciones.
in
Hoy,
infrastructure
digamos,
deployment in
como
telecommunications.
lo mire,
And depending on the way
el
we look at it,
70% de los latinoamericanos ya están
70%
conectados a
of
Internet.
Latin Americans are connected to the
Y eso,
internet.
pues, afortunadamente la pandemia es ahora que el 70% están conectados. ¿Qué tal hubiera sido hace
And
10 o 15 años?
70% are connected
Hoy
because on the
tenemos más
pandemic. If this
posibilidades de que la
happened
gente
6 or 7 years
teletrabaje,
ago, it would have been
tenga
terrible.
educación,
Right now, we do
educación,
home
tenga muchas
office,
posibilidades gracias a la
teleworking,
tecnología.
telecommunication, thanks to
Por
technology.
esa penetración
That's why
que es alta.
we
Sin
have
embargo, cuando uno empieza a abrir
this benefit because of the high
las
penetration of
cifras y
internet.
mira,
And when
resulta
you
que la
break
gran
it
mayoría
down,
todavía siguen conectados a redes de
you
3G,
realize that most of them are
redes de
connected to
4G.
3G, not even 4G.
Ya estamos hablando de redes de 5G.
And we are speaking of 5G already.
Y la primera pregunta es que mucha de nuestra audiencia
So the
no
first
sabe
question
eso
is that
qué es, eso de las redes 5G,
nobody knows what
qué
that
es, pero
is.
sobre
What is
todo,
5G?
qué van a significar para
And
el
what
consumidor.
are they going to
Y
mean
segundo, ¿qué
for the
tenemos que hacer para
consumer?
que ese 5G
And second,
efectivamente les llegue rápidamente
what do we
a toda
do in order to
Latinoamérica?
make this 5G
Bueno,
accessible to
muchas
all Latin
gracias, Diego.
Americans? Thank you very much,
Es una
Diego.
pregunta efectivamente
No,
en este
tienen que
punto.
empezar por el secreto. Tienen que empezar por el secreto.
Vamos a
You need
empezar
to
por el
tell your
secreto. Y
secret
voy a echar un
first.
secreto parecido también relacionado con las mujeres. A mí me criaron 4 mujeres.
One related to women. I
Mi
was
mamá me
raised by
tuvo
4
después de
women.
muchos años. Mis hermanos ya se habían ido de la casa. Y
My
me crió mi
brothers
mamá
were
y 3
grown-ups, and I
hermanas.
was raised
Entonces,
by my mother and
estoy
3
acostumbrado a que
sisters. So I'm used to
la cabeza del hogar y las decisiones y todo
growing
las
up
mujeres,
in a
y en este caso
world of
eran 4.
women that are
Pero
the
bueno,
decision makers, and
ahí
in this
dejé mi
case, are
pequeño,
4 of them.
mi pequeño secreto y gracias
So
por
that's
recordarme.
my secret.
Pero
Thank you for
volviendo,
reminding
digamos,
me.
al tema que pone Diego sobre la mesa, es muy interesante porque lo
Let's go
primero que hay
back
que entender
to the topic of
es que
discussion.
5G
We need to
no
understand that
es
5G
la nueva generación de tecnologías inalámbricas móviles
is a new
que van a
generation of
conectar,
mobile networks that are going
digamos,
to
nuestras
connect
vidas a las personas, a las máquinas.
lives,
Y Diego dice,
our
pero ¿y cómo
machines, and our
aterrizamos eso
people.
a Latinoamérica y cómo lo hacemos entendible?
So
¿Eso
how
qué
do
hay
we
detrás de
approach
eso?
this and
Pues
make Latin
es la
Americans
primera vez que
understand this
estas
concept? This is
redes
the first time
van a
that these
estar
networks
configuradas,
are going
diseñadas,
to be configured and
desplegadas,
designed and
pensando en que lo que
deployed,
se conecta a ellas no
thinking
son solo personas, sino también cosas.
that
Eso
we're
implica,
connecting people and things at
Diego
the same
también lo
time.
mencionaba,
And as
Latinoamérica dio
Diego
unos
said,
avances grandes en pasar de
this
conexiones
implies
indigentes y
making
conexiones
large
de gente que se
strides
empezó a conectar, sí,
of
estamos hablando de gente,
having no connection to
y
people being
gente
connected
que
in Latin
ha
America.
ido mejorando su
And some
calidad de
that they have
conexión,
improved their
pero ya
quality
muchos con la
of
pandemia nos hemos
connectivity.
dado cuenta que esas calidades ya no bastan,
But due to the
porque
pandemic,
ya
we
no es
know that
una
this
persona
quality
la que
is
se
not
conecta
enough
en el
because
hogar,
it's not
son
one person
varios.
being
Ya
connected in
no
the
es un
home, but
dispositivo, no
many.
es un
It's
computador,
not a
sino los
single
alrededores de
device or a
todos el
PC,
televisor.
but
Y
everybody's cell
asimismo,
phones,
imagínense
the
las
TV,
empresas. Las
Chromecast,
empresas,
and the same
cada
thing
vez
goes
la
for
conectividad
companies.
ya no es solo que
Connectivity
están conectados los que están trabajando,
it's
sino el
not
sistema de
that you're
seguridad
connecting employees, but you have
las luces deberían. Y
cybersecurity,
esto demanda otra red.
intelligent
Esto
lighting,
demanda un Wi-Fi de nueva
and this
generación, que es la charla
demands
que va a
a new
venir
generation
ahora, y
Wi-Fi, and
demanda una nueva
it's coming,
generación de
and
tecnologías móviles,
demands a
porque
new set
necesitamos
of
más
mobile next
velocidades,
generation
menor
devices.
latencia,
We
es decir,
need
que los datos
better
viajen más
speed,
rápido,
lower
y además
latency,
va a haber más
and at the same
concurrencia, más
time, you're
dispositivos
going to have
conectados y a
more
todo. Lo
devices
trato
being
de hacerlo más
connected at the
simple,
same time.
pero lo que queda
To put it
evidente,
simple,
volviendo al punto inicial, es que se avanzó en
What's
conectividad,
evident is
5G
that we
es
made
lo que
progress
permite
in
dar el
connectivity.
salto a
5G
avanzar en más
facilitates this
dispositivos
quantum
conectados,
leap
en no solo conectar
in having
personas, sino
more
también cosas,
devices
y
connected
sobre
to
todo
people and
poder
to
soportar
things,
esa
and at the
concurrencia.
same
No es lo
time
mismo una
supporting
persona conectada a
all
muchas
this
personas, muchas
connectivity.
cosas,
You
y
have many
además las
people and many things
necesidades
being
de
connected
velocidad, latencia
and
y demás
serving those
que
needs like
demandan muchas
latency
de
and
las
speed
aplicaciones de
demanded
ahora
by
y del
many of
futuro.
the applications and
Bien,
future
muchas gracias
applications as well.
a Carlos Rebellon. Vamos con Santiago. Santiago, ¿tú dónde estás?
Santiago,
¿Estás en
Santiago, where are you?
Sí, listo. Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos. Pues estoy
Good
ubicado en Ciudad
afternoon.
de México. Vivo aquí
I
en
am
la Ciudad de
located in
México.
Mexico, in the city of
Sean todos su
Mexico.
casa, son bienvenidos.
That's where I live.
Muy bien. Santiago, tú que eres un experto en este despliegue de infraestructura, en estos
As you're an
fierros,
expert in technology
¿qué deben
deployment,
hacer los gobiernos para
how do governments approach,
esta
or
nueva
how
infraestructura
should
necesarias
governments
para
approach
una
this new
infraestructura
development or
para las
deployment
redes
of
de 5G, para las redes de IoT?
infrastructure for 5G?
Digamos, ¿cuáles son unas buenas experiencias o buenos
What are
modelos
the
que debe
best
recomendar
practices or the best models that you
en
recommend
materia
to
de
governments,
política? ¿Qué debe hacer el sector público para
or
que
in terms of policy
esas redes
making?
lleguen
How
más rápido,
how should the
una buena calidad
public
a
sector go about it to
Perfecto.
provide better
Bueno,
quality to
comienzo
more
por el
people?
secreto, como lo indicaste en un inicio.
Let me
Bueno,
address
yo
my
tuve la
secret.
oportunidad de, trabajando en el sector telco también,
I
de
had the
vivir en
chance to work
Argelia.
for telcos and
Entonces,
to work in
considero que
Algeria.
una de las lecciones,
And
y a la
one of
vez
the
lo
lessons
menciono
learned,
también como secreto, es que
and
yo
I
no
bring
tenía
it
como
as a
tal la
secret here,
magnitud
because I
del valor
didn't
de las
have
mujeres. No nada más en la
the
incorporación
understanding of the value of women, not only in the telecommunications sectors, but to our personal lives. And when I lived in Algeria, and as I relate to Muslims, sometimes we had a misconception, or probably it's not that clear, of how things are managed in the Muslim world. And I came to realize that there were many things that were not appropriate, but at the same time, I knew that they value the positioning of women in society in comparison to the West. They have a different perspective, religiously speaking, and there are many, many things where we have differences. However, the secret is the value of women in our lives. This is the lesson learned, living in a different world, having a concept of women that is totally different. So this is my contribution. Now, that was a secret. Let's address your question. How should the government go about with operators and carriers? In Nokia, we become facilitators, which is a crucial aspect. What are the challenges ahead of us for the 5.0, for the 4.0 industry, for 5G, or the Internet of Things? Because, as my colleague said, this is going to become an unprecedented revolution that are not only things we're going to it's not only that we're connecting things, but also connecting more people that will require more capability and more quality of service. We should have 24/7 availability. And with regulators, we explain to them not how things are going to be, but as stakeholders, as players, and as providers in the industry. We need to become facilitators, and we need to make this ecosystem grow through standardization for 5G. That means the channels of communication, what are the protocols that are going to be implemented, and the way to interconnect that ecosystem. So it's not precisely saying how it's going to be done, but to facilitate through the collaboration of all the stakeholders in the ecosystem. As such, we are part of those international organizations, and we talk to them in dialogue with Latin America, from Mexico to Chile. And we're discussing with regulators, regulatory framework, with the agencies, with the governments, and we tell them what the best practices are, the best business models, and we should place emphasis for the growth of our region. It's not that we have a way ahead of us, but to show them the opportunities and the challenges that we're faced with, and to become facilitators, because we are crucial, we are key, we are the ones that they have global presence. We know where standards are going and where communication is going. Right now, with the industry that is 4.0, we have seen that challenge. 5G is not only because of the people that we're going to integrate, but all the devices. It requires lower latencies that are unthinkable. We found incredible experience where devices require lower latency than we as human beings have milliseconds to have a reliable network. And this is the sort of things that we need to convey to the regulators and the agency, placing priority over what is necessary to grow this ecosystem.
Bueno, pero Santiago, otra vez,
Santiago,
si tú fueras regulador,
I'm asking, if you were a
¿qué
regulator,
harías para que
what would you do
las redes estas nuevas redes se
so
desplegaran
these new
a
networks
un costo
be
eficiente,
deployed
¿no?
faster
Servicios
and efficiently,
puedan prestarse más baratos
so
a más personas y
services could
que fueran
become
realmente a
cheaper
más sitios?
and having access remotely to more sites? If I were the regulator, as an industry, I would be a facilitator, and I would sit down with all the technology providers, and I would tell them, okay, show me what are the cases, the business models, what is your experience at the worldwide level? Tell me to what locations you're targeting with 5G, and how are you providing the people that are not connected to the connected users. For example, a basic example. What are the companies, operationally speaking, that have not evolved so much? For example, the car assembly plants. Those factories, probably, as a regulator, I can say, okay, I'm going to create that ecosystem for that assembly plant, automobile assembly plant, with a repetition, though, to provide coverage, to have a new business model with larger revenue, and we're going to implement the same coverage to those that are next to it and that are not connected. Most of them are industrial areas, so we promote the growth of the automobile industry, and at the same time, I'm helping and promoting that sector of population that is not connected. So it's a way of growing. It's not imposing, but benefit all the sectors that are participating in that industry at large. Patricio, two questions before the technical questions. First, what are you? Santiago was discussing those that are not connected and how to connect them. You have experience, Santiago, because Patricio is a founder of Indigrantes. How do you see this transition? Those that are not connected or those that are not technologically adept?
Hi, Diego. Well, I think one of the major problems that the speed at which internet has evolved has come up against is that the people that we want to use them haven't been trained. So they can't access technology at that same speed. And this is something that has happened largely in the last 40, 50 years. Historically speaking, the issue of the adoption of technology has been far more linear, always from the point of view of the need of involving users within the same process, because otherwise, from the point of view of technological development, what's happening is that technology is being developed without thinking about who's on the other side. People are going to be using it. And over history, we've always seen this. For instance, when the telephone was invented and it started to be used back in the 1920s, there were manuals which would make us laugh these days, because these were manuals that show people how to use telephones, so that users knew that they had to put the handset up against the ear and the face, and there were pictures and everything telling people how to use this. So think of digital immigrants, the Prensky's definition, which I think is probably it probably needs to be updated, because I think at this point we need to accept that we are all digital immigrants. But thinking of digital immigrants is like thinking about people who, in terms of speed, have been left behind or are in the process of being left behind as regards technological evolution. There's a point of no return, isn't there, when this process becomes exponential. If you look back at the talks we've heard today, we can see that the exponential speed at which technology is being developed is beneficial on the one hand, but it also exacerbates the gaps that we're seeing throughout the region.
Patricio, ¿dónde estás?
Patricio, where are you? In Buenos Aires. And what's your secret? My secret. I shall take advantage of the fact that this forum is not so mixed. Right. It's only us four, isn't it? Or five. So I will confess my little secret. So when I'm not working in technology, and which is something that really inspires me, I dedicate myself to literature. I write, in fact. I'm a writer. I write fiction. Yeah, novels. Do you have anything published that we can see? Oh, yes, I've had a novel published. And I'll share it later, okay? Right? Okay, that's my secret. Thank you.
Muy bien. Bueno, don Facundo Fernanzez.
Fine. Facundo Fernanzez, where are you?
Doctor, ¿cómo le va? Buenas tardes. Aquí estoy.
Hello and good afternoon.
Vivo y en directo desde
Here I
Buenos
am.
Aires.
I'm talking to you from Buenos Aires.
Saludar primero a Olga y a Adrián y a
I'd like to say hi to Olga and Adrián and
por haber
Oscar
invitado,
first and
a
thank
estar
them
otra
for
vez más
inviting me
en
once
esta nueva
again
edición de la Escuela
to
Sur
be
de
a
Governanza.
part of this
En
latest
realidad,
edition of the
tengo dos
South School on Internet
secretos para
Governance.
compartir entre
I have
nosotros
two
nada más.
secrets to share with you,
El
and
primero
only
es la
with you.
envidia que te
First
tengo
is the envy,
porque nos
really,
estás ahora hablando
because I'm
directamente
very
desde la zona del
envious
Caribe.
of you.
Y la segunda es un poco
You're
más
talking to us
doméstica.
from the Caribbean,
Estamos
and the
todos
other's a little
hablando
bit
de
more
la
complex.
conectividad en este
We're all talking
escenario
about
de pandemia, donde
connectivity
estamos todos aquí
in this
todavía
context of the pandemic,
bajo
where
otra medida confinados
many
en
of
nuestras
us are
casas.
still
Y para poder
confined to
estar
our
conectados con
homes.
ustedes y
And
que
in
la
order
banda
to be
ancha
online with
funcione bien,
you,
tengo
and in order to
a
make
mis
sure
dos hijos
bandwidth was working
encerrados
properly,
en un
I've got my
escritorio
2
sin ningún
kids
dispositivo
locked up
electrónico
in my
y
office without
obviamente
any
una
devices.
Samaria de fierro que está ahí
And
tratando
obviously, it's going to be a
que
pretty
no tenga ningún
difficult
grito de
situation.
fuego que
And
suelen tener.
my wife is making sure that they aren't going to interrupt us with any screams.
Facundo, mira, Patricio y
Well, Facundo
hemos hablado hoy aquí de esa brecha,
and Patricio and everybody here today, we're talking about this digital gap. How has it affected you?
Internet no es suficiente.
It's because clearly just having an internet connection isn't enough,
No tiene una
because
buena calidad. Me está
most
pasando
people
a mí también.
don't have, and I'll tell you something, it's happening to me too.
Pero la conexión al
Fiber
interior de la
optics,
casa tiene
yes,
problemas.
but the connection within the inside of the house isn't so good. I've wandered around the house and there just isn't a good connection. The problem is that sometimes the connection passes through many places, and it sometimes looks as if they have a bad connection. And you say, yes, I have an internet connection, but it comes off the smartphone with 3G networks, and often it's prepaid. So what can we do, Facundo, that with approaching this new deployment of the networks, what can we do to close this digital gap? What Patricio was saying is, for instance, in order that this doesn't create even more of a gap between the haves and the have-nots? That's a very good question, Diego. The first thing comes to mind is that we need to look at where we're standing. Currently, we are on a fairly extraordinary road, the road of connectivity, because we could say that it's like a new starting point, these new ways of socializing, interacting between people, new ways of working. And in the last decade, the networks, mobile communications, 5G have kicked off a new era of digitalization, looking towards a digital future, which will have a major socio-economic impact, but also, as you say, in terms of the digital gap, something that has to be bridged. On the side of the technology, we as service providers and also platform providers for our clients who are mobile operators, we are very involved in the process of standardization and cellular technology. At the same time, we are committed to joint work to achieve an alliance between the public and private sectors to enable the different governments to close the digital gap and sharing the improvements which happen in the private sector as we see what are the best ways of deploying infrastructure in order to take everybody down the road of digitalization. And when we talk about the road towards digitalization, we're not just talking about the top tier of the market. We're talking about a competitiveness agenda, which is more holistic, more inclusive when it's about distributing economic benefits. From the public sector point of view, this requires, again, a very comprehensive and cross-sector approach to developing ICTs with a view to closing the digital gap. So we're looking at the area of demand, where we need to develop different kinds of practices, and on the side of demand to help people achieve connectivity and to help people understand what they can do with connectivity, how to achieve it. And that's what makes it so hard for us in a sense, because we're looking at the evangelization of certain issues that are clear in terms of achieving the connectivity. For instance, spectrum. We have to have the sufficient spectrum frequency, which is like our motorway, if you will, for wireless communications when we are looking towards these new technologies. As Rebellon said, we're looking at a whole process of evolution and transformation, and we're also looking at the way this is a factor for change, which requires an agreement between the public and private sectors in order to bridge the digital gap, and particularly between the regions, which is the big problem that Latin America has. So that's my first reaction to your question, Diego. Thank you. Carlos, you work for Intel and you make chips. Intel has been a major player to ensure that terminals reach where they should. I have two questions for you. How many of the terminals today, like computers and cell phones, how many of these are actually ready to take 5G? We all thought they were ready for 4G. We will need to know when they're going to be ready for 5G as well as the Wi-Fi networks, or not. Maybe we need to be looking elsewhere. And the second question is, what do we do to ensure that these terminals become cheaper, because this is the major obstacle. I've done a survey in some of the top cities in Latin America, and we discovered that most homes, some children, some adults, were sharing one device between 5 people because they weren't ready. They couldn't afford to buy more devices or terminals, so that each person, each child could connect to their own lessons, or their parents each had a computer to work from home. So what can we do to make sure the prices come down? For tablets, smartphones, and computers, what can we do? Well, I'm going to split the answer into various parts. The first point is that there will gradually be better 5G networks, and the ways the radios in the cities, which will bring connectivity to homes, as we've already seen starting to happen. And then the issue about the terminals. I'm talking about for 5G will connect my home to abroad and outside, and Wi-Fi is what ensures a good connection within the house. So we are hoping that Wi-Fi 6 this year, there will be devices able to hand it, and we're looking at 6 gigahertz next year, and 5G terminals will also start to appear in the markets where there's already a deployment of a network and radio frequency. In many countries, this will only start happening next year. But the point is that until the government says, I have a plan, and I'm going to auction these frequencies, and it's going to be a long-term plan of 5 years maybe, this is the first sign that companies will see, the companies that Facundo and Santiago work for, and that's when these companies are saying, yes, there's going to be demand there, and that's where they're going to start deploying the networks. And then finally come the vendors with their devices, because it's a chicken and egg situation, really, isn't it? And there's no point in jumping the gun. That's the general response to the first question. The second one, of course, there is major pressure on this, the issue of accessibility. I think the problem so far has been that the governments have seen this in a fragmented way, and they will say, I want connections to be more affordable, but only in a certain way. Or I want terminals to be affordable, but we'll forget about the connections. And sometimes they even forget about people. Maybe it's affordable, but people don't know what they're for or what these connections are for even. So we need comprehensive policies. And in the issue of the PC, although smartphone use has grown massively in terms of the way these are financed, but I'd say there's been very little effort made to finance PC purchases. There are very few governments who are focused on that, on providing alternatives. And now with the pandemic, it was left abundantly clear that the smartphone is particularly useful to communicate and to be online. And the computer is for working together, to work on creative jobs. So I think much of the aspect of the massification and the success of mobile communications, which is connectivity plus device, I think we need to take it to the world of the computers. And I think part of the problem has been that these were managed separately. And I think another problem was that we thought that one device was going to cover all needs. So, as you said, a home might have, with one smartphone, they could do everything, but the reality is that each person needs a smartphone. So for somebody, we're all going to need a class. You can't give a class on data science, say, on a smartphone. You have to have a computer. So we need comprehensive policies, we need financing, and we need a more aggressive policies in those areas, because technology is going to continue to develop. Right, Santiago? There's one thing I don't understand. See if you can help me understand this. the deployment of these networks is very expensive, right? The governments charge per spectrum, so we have to pay. The carriers have to pay for the spectrum, and the carriers have to invest in cells. For 5G, they have to multiply the number of cells because you need a greater density of cells to deploy the 5G. In a city like this Mexico City, we probably 5G cells every 100 meters. So the number of cells is going to grow exponentially. And then we're looking at fiber optics, right? So we have to pay for the infrastructure, which is incredibly expensive. The question is, where's this money going to go? Because where's the money going to come from? Because the users are paying as much as we can. Users already paying for internet. So how is that money going to the telecoms carriers? So what are users supposed to be paying for, given that they're already having financial problems because of the pandemic? Where is the money going to come from? And what are the carriers going to charge as an extra? And who's going to pay for it? Argentina doesn't have any money to cover 3G or 4G services. How on earth are people going to pay more advanced services? Who knew these new services? How can they cover the costs of these tenders, which will be massive? Yes, your question is quite clear. And I think I'm going to divide it into two. The first part looks at the technological aspect, and the second is commercial. In answer specifically to how many access points we will have deployed throughout the city. You gave an example, Mexico City, which is one of those popular cities in the world. But I'm going to be very specific in my response. Technological evolution. We have developed solutions on the base that you have today, which provides, say these services provide 2 or 3 or 4G at the same time. That means that you can evolve to provide 5G within that base point. This means that we're going to be cutting operations costs, and investments, CAPEX and OPEX, will also go down, because you can, from the same place, provide those services, those 5G services, bearing in mind the macro nodes, those massive antennas that we have in the streets, on the roofs of buildings. But there will also be different access layers. For instance, in a building that's connected, where you have lots of businesses and there's very high need in terms of access, we'll have these echo cells, little small cells that will provide access to certain kinds of users. 5G is characterized precisely for the multi-access it offers. It's not only through macro access points, but you'll also have small access points. And services will be provided which will be perfectly tailored to these. For instance, like a shopping center. We will be able to rely on Wi-Fi and small cells working in the available spectrum. So we will have a multi-access network. So in technological terms, we have covered part of the problem, or dealt with the challenge of implementing 5G in the very same places where carriers were already present or had their own property, and they could emit the signal for 2 or 3 or 4G, they will be able to have 5G there too. Now, if we look at this from the commercial point of view, you're quite right. Users shouldn't have to pay for this. So this is why we have new business models. Let me give you a simple example. What do the OTTs do? Whether they're Google, Apple, Facebook, or Amazon. They're the big four. They're multimillionaire companies. Their main business is data. There are data, right? Because we provide them with that data. And what we try to emphasize is that what we're doing is empowering the carriers so that these services are paid for through, for example, geolocalization services. If I pass by, I don't know, a services center or a burger joint, and where I've already bought something, then they can make me a proactive offer. And then I can have a discount, and the carrier begins to get more services on board and can mobilize their geolocation services on the basis of my location, which I already decided, I agreed, right, to offer them. I gave them permission to know where I am and what I'm consuming. Now, today, they already know that, but it hasn't been monetized. So we need to facilitate the growth of that ecosystem so that at the end of the day, the carrier is benefited with new business models, and me as an end consumer don't have to end up paying extra. In fact, some 10 years ago, if I remember rightly, we were talking about the fact that end users were only going to pay €1 for telecom services in their different mobile or fixed devices, because this was going to be sponsored by the new services and monetization on the basis of geolocation services, advertising, augmented reality, VR. So what I'm actually doing is helping that ecosystem to grow. I don't know if that's the right answer to your question.
Yeah, some of your ideas are very interesting. But I don't know if you watch the Social Dilemma documentary, especially right now, carriers want to manage the data apart from the hotels. So this new world is changing everything because people are becoming more concerned. But to tell you the truth, when you do some surveys, conduct some surveys, people are interested in having data with Google, with Facebook, with the major four telecommunication companies, and they don't have any problems with that. The same with WhatsApp. 94% of the users that have never read the conditions and terms. And Facebook, nobody knows the regulatory framework where they operate. But yeah, we provide them our data in turn for the service that we use for free. And we are using Zoom. I believe that Adrián and Olga are paying for this license, but we can also use Zoom for free. So how can a company make profit if it's a free service? How are they going to pay for payroll and all that? That's what Santiago says about the new models, and precisely is the question that I have for Patricio. Obviously, we're creating a transformation in the labor market. We have layoffs, and there's a new way of infrastructure for engineers. Just like me, I come from engineering, telecommunications engineering, the hardware. Patricio, since you're working with talent, technologically speaking, what would you recommend for to somebody necessary training to join this new world of infrastructure and to have better possibilities of employability and to have a better job in the future? What should you recommend to these people? The great challenge ahead of us, Diego, is to try to predict the future, because we hasten the times, and to train and to educate people is not easy and it takes time. So it's a long-term investment that should be made considering a prediction of the future. And we need to do this and try to conceive the ODS, or for example, the SDGs. The SDGs are thought for the year 2030. So what our jobs are going to be like for the year 2030? What is the population going to be like in the year 2030? This requires creativity. For example, we reviewed a space, and that space talks about an impact on society and our daily life. So we wonder, what is our daily lives like? Because precisely it was not the one we had or that we lived in February. We don't know what our life is going to be like in 2030, let alone next year. So it's very, very complex. What would you recommend, or what I recommend, because we cannot recommend, but probably the attitude that we need to have that has to do with creativity, and try to imagine things, not fiction-like, but to read, to see what data reveals, what are predictive analysis like. Today we were hearing from studies held or conducted by CLAC that are fundamental to see the way we're going, how we're approaching the future. And I add to Santiago's comments by saying having creativity in business models, because we're in 2030 and we cannot have the same business models as finished and implemented in the history. And that has a limit from the point of view of labor opportunities or employment opportunities. We have challenges that we need to overcome, because Diego was saying things about employment and how we're going to support the pension fund, because the aging population where the pyramids are getting inverted, so you're going to have a minor labor force to support an aging population that is passive, that is going to require a standard of living that right now basically is demanding a lot. So we have to rethink what the major universities or the Ivy League universities are doing across the world. First, to rethink and to reshape the educational models. For example, we were not ready for a pandemic. Some already than others, but we were not ready for the point of view of infrastructure and e-learning. And let alone, we're ready to have training for the future. Let me give you an example that becomes relevant. The educational statistics for Argentina in terms of university training revealed that 50% approximately, and they come from 2 or 3 years ago, but I believe the same trend follows suit. 50% of those that are registered in economic sciences or law. So we're not investing in human resources that are thinking of future careers. Economic sciences is a major that is not going to become obsolete, but is going to be very highly impacted in the next few years, because as a result of the Internet of Things, microconducts, automation, things that you need to consider. Yeah, it's not only the hardware, but we have to rewire our brains. They're telling me to close because, but first I would like to ask Facundo one more thing. Yes, I would like to reply to what Santiago said, the carriers and how they're going to pay for the spectrum. First, we need to put an end to this policy to collect between the trade-off, or a trade-off between the monetary needs of the state and the economic and social benefits that are going to provide you with better connectivity. And how are you going to have the money out of the consumers? Well, we conducted a study. You can get it out of our website, where we analyzed in 22 countries, whether it was smartphone users that account for 1 billion users, to tear down the myths to see if there is a benefit in the short term with 5G networks, or that are probably you can pay a premium price for the 5G network. And it falls down when people are willing to pay a premium price for an application that provides better employment opportunities, better educational opportunities, or to be more connected, and other uses from other points of view, not only from the final user, but on the industrial transformation and something that is going to create better opportunities by having better connection and to make improvement and to provide better jobs given the digitalization of economies and the Industrial Revolution 4.0. They are insisting that we finish and we conclude our remarks. Thank you. It has been very, very interesting. I learned a lot from your experience, and I would like to acknowledge the school, the Southern School of Internet Governance. Have a nice day.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias, Diego. Gracias, Carlos.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Carlos, Facundo, and Santiago, and Patricio. A great pleasure to see you and to interact remotely. It was very philosophical on the educational needs, what to adapt. Everything that we learned is good, but we need to reinvent ourselves. And I was thinking of the spectrum auction. If you are used to having these sort of auctions where billions of dollars are earned. I'm going to introduce the last panel for today. I would like to thank Carlos Rebellon that put me in contact with these two people. The last panel is on Wi-Fi of the future. For those of you that are not that technical, Wi-Fi requires some spectrum frequency. It's like streets on space where you exchange some information. And these streets are in an orderly fashion, regulated, and the regulatory agency tells you, well, you're the carrier of these services, what street to take and which one not. Wi-Fi has a beauty that we can use some parts or portions of these spectrum where to circulate that have more freedom. These are not licenses, parts, or modernized portions of it. And we have some pre-established bands. And since Wi-Fi is widely used and is the main access through any devices like smartphones, tablets, or computers, there are even cities that offer Wi-Fi for free of public domain. Or they are used to download traffic out of mobile networks that they go to Wi-Fi instead of using their personal data that may be overloaded with traffic. So Wi-Fi has evolved technologically wise towards new technicalities, technical models, and spectrum variations. That's what our next panel is going to be on. These are experts. I like to acknowledge Carlos that put me in contact with these people. One is Michael Kramer, that is based in Germany. And Hassan Yahobi. Those people, or these two people, work in Intel. They're going to speak in English. So please pick your language, or there's a language selector, and you choose Spanish, and you will hear the translation. I'm going to introduce him briefly, and later I'm going to speak with them in English, and the translators will be ready to switch into Spanish.
The last panel of the day. Now, tomorrow we're going to be starting at 9:30. We're going to be covering other things like data governance, financing, the digital pact, sustainable connectivity. These issues are slightly less technical, a bit more strategic, Today is the longest day. We're delivering with intellectual property, participation in the ICANN ecosystem. Now, if you're interested in ICANN, there's a special panel on this. We have Warren Murray, who is the CEO of ICANN, who's going to be telling us a little bit about this. And then we're also going to have other experts from ICANN who are going to be talking about root servers, domain names, systems, and other things which have to do with the organizations that coordinate internet at global level. And at the end of the day, we'll just see, we were also going to be looking at domain name systems security, DNSSEC, and a long panel on opportunities and intellectual property. And I'm waiting for comments from the technical team. Okay, we're going to go for a little break. Don't leave us yet. We'll be going on to our next panel any minute now.